I'm Sophia Reed, 32, and I still remember the exact moment my life changed. My sister Amber brought her new boyfriend Ryan to our family dinner. When he mocked my recent job loss and appearance, everyone at the table erupted in laughter, everyone except me. As tears threatened to spill, something hardened inside me. That dinner table humiliation sparked a fire that would eventually burn down their perfect facades. They had no idea what happens when you push someone too far. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned because trust me, you'll want to see how this family drama explodes into something none of us expected. Growing up with Amber wasn't easy. 4 years my junior, she was always the golden child, beautiful, popular, and somehow exempt from the crushing expectations our parents placed on me. While I was expected to maintain perfect grades, Amber's C's were celebrated simply because she tried her best. This pattern continued well into our adulthood. Our father, James Reed, built his consulting firm from nothing. A tall, imposing man with salt and pepper hair and a perpetual frown, he demanded excellence from everyone, especially me. Our mother, Diane, was the quintessential corporate wife, immaculately dressed, socially connected, and utterly obsessed with appearances. Between them, they created a household where success wasn't celebrated. It was expected. Failure, however, was dissected with surgical precision at the dinner table. By 32, my life wasn't matching their blueprint. After being laid off from my marketing position during company restructuring, I was struggling to find work in a saturated field. Meanwhile, Amber at 28 had already secured a position at a prestigious public relations firm, a job conveniently arranged through our father's connections. When Amber announced she'd be bringing her new boyfriend to Sunday dinner, my parents were ecstatic. Ryan Williams was everything they wanted for their favorite daughter. 34, devastatingly handsome with piercing blue eyes and a confident smile, a junior partner at a downtown law firm and the owner of a renovated brownstone in the exclusive part of town. Before he even walked through the door, my parents had practically planned their wedding. The dinner started as expected. My mother fussed over Amber and Ryan serving them first and laughing too loudly at his jokes. My father engaged Ryan in discussions about investment strategies and golf courses I knew he'd never visited. I sat quietly passing dishes and attempting to remain invisible. So Sophia Ryan said, turning those blue eyes toward me after his third glass of my father's expensive wine, "Amber tells me you're between jobs right now." The way he paused made it sound like I was between prison sentences. I forced a smile. "Yes, the market's tough right now, but I have a promising interview next week." "Oh," Ryan smirked. "Hopefully they don't judge on appearance." "I hear first impressions are everything." His eyes deliberately scanned me from head to toe. I felt my face heat up. I'd gained weight since losing my job, stress eating was my weakness, and had thrown on a simple blouse and slacks for dinner, nothing like Amber's designer dress. Ryan Amber giggled playfully, smacking his arm. "Be nice." But then he delivered the knockout blow. "I'm just saying if I walked into an interview looking like I'd given up on life, I wouldn't expect a callback. But then again, some companies probably have diversity quotas for the..." Fuller figured. The table erupted in laughter. My father's deep chuckle, my mother's delicate titter, and Amber's high-pitched giggle created a symphony of humiliation. I sat frozen, my fork suspended midway to my mouth. Sophia's always struggled with her weight, my mother offered, as if providing context to a stranger about why her daughter was defective. "And her career choices," my father added. "Never could quite stick with anything." I placed my napkin beside my barely touched plate and excused myself to the bathroom. Looking at my reflection, I hardly recognized the woman's staring back eyes brimming with unshed tears, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. This wasn't me. The Sophia I knew wouldn't let them treat her this way. The drive home was silent except for the occasional sniffle I couldn't suppress. By the time I reached my modest apartment, determination had replaced humiliation. Out of habit, I checked social media before bed. A notification showed Amber had tagged Ryan in several photos from dinner. I clicked through them all, perfect filtered snapshots of a happy couple with adoring parents. None included me. As I scrolled through Ryan's profile, something caught my eye. A comment from someone named Jessica Still, using the same fake smile to charm the parents I see. Some things never change. The comment had been quickly deleted, but not before I'd seen it. My investigative instincts, honed through years of marketing research, kicked in. Who was Jessica? And what did she mean by fate? In that moment, staring at Ryan's too-perfect profile picture, I made a decision. If my family wouldn't protect me from this man, perhaps I needed to protect them from him, whether they wanted it or not. Monday morning, rather than job hunting, I found myself doing something I never expected: investigating my sister's boyfriend. It felt wrong initially, like I was simply acting out of spite. But the comment from Jessica had planted a seed of genuine concern. I started with basic social media stalking. Ryan's online presence was meticulously curated. Professional headshots, carefully tagged locations at upscale restaurants and exclusive clubs, connections to prominent local figures. Everything screamed success and legitimacy. Too perfect, perhaps. I noticed his social history only went back about 5 years. Before that, nothing. For someone in their mid-30s, this digital gap seemed suspicious. Most people our age had embarrassing photos from college, old relationship statuses, something. Ryan's online existence began when he was already a polished professional. Remembering an old college friend, Heather Jenkins, now worked for a company that conducted background checks, I reached out for coffee. After catching up, I carefully broached the subject. "I'm concerned about my sister's new boyfriend," I explained. "Something feels off." Heather's expression turned serious. "I can't access company resources without authorization, Sophia. That would be illegal." "I understand," I said, disappointed but not surprised. She stirred her latte thoughtfully. "However, I can tell you what public records might be worth checking. As a concerned sister, you have every right to look into public information." By Wednesday, armed with Heather's advice, I discovered my first bombshell: Ryan Williams hadn't always been Ryan Williams. 6 years ago, he was Richard Wilson. The name change was legal but buried in county records. Digging deeper revealed financial irregularities, bankruptcy filings under his former name, followed by a sudden influx of wealth just before his transformation into Ryan Williams. Nothing explicitly criminal emerged, but the timeline didn't add up for someone claiming to have built his success through hard work and determination, as he'd boasted at dinner. I debated what to do with this information. The smart move would be gathering more evidence before confronting anyone. But when Amber called Thursday night, bubbling with excitement about a weekend trip with Ryan, my concern overrode caution. "Amber, I need to talk to you about Ryan," I said. "What about him?" Her voice immediately cooled. "I've found some concerning information. He changed his name. He had financial problems. I think you should be careful." "Are you serious right now?" she interrupted. "You're looking into my boyfriend, God, Sophia. This is low, even for you. I'm worried about you. Something doesn't feel right." "No, what doesn't feel right is my jealous sister digging up dirt because a successful, attractive man chose me instead of her." The accusation stung. "This isn't about jealousy. He's hiding things. You know what? I'm done with this conversation. And if you mention any of this conspiracy theory nonsense to Mom and Dad, I'll make sure they know exactly how pathetic you've become." The line went dead. I sat in stunned silence, staring at my phone. I'd expected skepticism, but not this level of hostility. The following Sunday dinner was excruciating. Ryan was there again now, openly treating me with contempt. Amber had clearly told him about our conversation. My parents sensed the tension and naturally assumed I was at fault. Sophia, my father, cornered me in the kitchen. "What's this I hear about you investigating Ryan?" "Dad, I found information that—" "Stop." He held up his hand. "This needs to end. Your sister is happy. Ryan is a good man with excellent prospects. This jealousy is becoming pathetic." "It's not jealousy. He changed his name. He's hiding his past. Don't you think that's worth looking into before he becomes part of the family?" My father's expression hardened. "The only thing I think is that you need help. Professional help. Your mother and I have discussed it and we're concerned about your behavior since losing your job." "My behavior? What about everyone laughing at me when Ryan insulted me last week? He was joking." "Learn to take a joke, Sophia. Not everything is an attack." When I tried showing him the documents I'd printed, he refused to look. My mother was no better. Later, as I was preparing to leave, she pulled me aside. "Darling, have you considered therapy? There are excellent counselors who specialize in sibling rivalry and—" She lowered her voice. "Making up stories for attention." I left without saying goodbye, rage and determination building with every mile I drove home. If my family wouldn't listen, I needed indisputable evidence. The next morning, I contacted Nathan Cooper, a private investigator whose card I'd kept after a marketing campaign my former company had done for his firm. He was expensive, nearly depleting my savings, but his reputation was impeccable. "I need everything you can find on this man," I said, sliding Ryan's information across his desk. "Especially anything from before he became Ryan Williams." Nathan nodded his expression, giving nothing away. "May I ask why?" "He's dating my sister. I believe he's hiding something potentially dangerous." "Family protection," he nodded. "One of the most common reasons people come to me. I'll need a retainer." As I wrote the check, I wondered if I was making a terrible mistake. What if I was wrong? What if this really was just jealousy disguised as concern? 2 days later, Nathan called. "Miss Reed, you're going to want to see this. Your instincts were correct. This man is not who he claims to be." Nathan's office was sparsely furnished, but meticulously organized, much like the man himself. As I settled into the chair across from his desk, he slid a manila folder toward me. "Richard Wilson, now known as Ryan Williams, has been married twice before Nathan began without preamble. Both marriages lasted less than 18 months. Both ended when significant assets disappeared." My stomach tightened as I flipped through documentation of marriage certificates and divorce filings. "Neither ex-wife pursued criminal charges?" I asked. "The first, Melissa Gardner, received threatening messages when she attempted to. The second, Jessica Barnett, moved across the country immediately after their divorce." He tapped a photograph. "This is Jessica." The name clicked immediately, the woman who'd left that comment on Ryan's social media. Looking at her picture, I felt an immediate connection to this stranger who'd been where my sister now stood. "There's more," Nathan continued. "Wilson or Williams has been associated with several businesses that folded under suspicious circumstances. Investors lost millions, while he somehow walked away financially intact. The pattern suggests sophisticated fraud, but he's careful. Always a partner, never the sole proprietor. Always one step removed from direct liability." "What about his law career? Is that even real?" "He did attend law school and pass the bar. His professional credentials are legitimate, though his client list is interesting." Nathan showed me connections between Ryan's law firm and several businesses flagged for regulatory violations. He specializes in helping certain clients navigate gray areas. Gray areas meaning potential illegal activity. That would be my assessment. I sat back processing. Can you find Jessica Barnett? I need to speak with her. Nathan hesitated. She's been difficult to track. After the divorce, she changed her name and moved frequently. Classic behavior of someone who fears being found. But you can find her. I already have, he admitted. I wanted to be thorough before bringing you unvetted information. 3 days later, I was sitting in a coffee shop 200 miles away waiting for a woman I'd never met but with whom I shared a bizarre connection. When Jessica arrived, I almost didn't recognize her from the photograph. Gone was the confident, smiling blonde. In her place stood a nervous brunette who scanned the room before approaching. "You're Sophia?" she asked quietly. I nodded, gesturing to the chair across from me. For nearly 2 hours, Jessica detailed her nightmare marriage to the man now dating my sister. The charm offensive, the whirlwind romance, the gradual isolation from friends and family who expressed concerns. Then came financial control gaslighting and eventually the discovery that he'd been systematically draining her inheritance into offshore accounts. When I confronted him, he became someone else entirely, she said, hands trembling around her cup. The mask dropped. He told me no one would believe me over him, and he was right. My own parents thought I was having a mental breakdown when I tried to explain. Did he? I hesitated. Was there physical abuse? No, he's too smart for that. No evidence, no witnesses, nothing that can't be explained away as a misunderstanding. She pulled out her phone, showing me screenshots of messages. But he made sure I knew what would happen if I pushed too hard. The threats were vague enough to maintain deniability, but specific enough to terrify. References to her daily routines, her parents' address, her best friend's children. After the divorce, I found evidence he was still legally married to Melissa when he married me, Jessica continued. Our entire marriage was technically fraudulent. When I tried to report it, strange things started happening. Break-ins where nothing was taken. Cars following me. I eventually just ran. My investigation expanded beyond what even Nathan was providing. I created a detailed timeline of Ryan's activities, tracking his professional history against his known locations. Patterns emerged of businesses failing shortly after his departure, of wealthy women suffering financial setbacks after dating him. Most disturbing was a photo series I discovered through social media backdoors, Ryan with different women at the same restaurants, same vacation spots, same poses, spanning years. Like he was running the same playbook repeatedly. Armed with this evidence, I attempted another conversation with my sister. I invited her to lunch at her favorite restaurant, hoping neutral territory might make her more receptive. "I know you think I'm interfering," I began carefully after we'd ordered. "But please just look at what I've found." I showed her the documents, the photographs, Jessica's testimony. Amber's face remained impassive until I mentioned Ryan's still valid marriage to his first wife. "You're saying he's still married? That's impossible." "I've met his family. They would have mentioned a wife." "Have you met them, or have you met people he introduced as family?" I challenged. Jessica thought she'd met his parents, too. They were actors, Amber, part of his scheme. Something flickered in my sister's eyes, doubt, perhaps before hardening into resolve. She stood gathering her purse. "You've always been like this, Sophia. Always trying to ruin anything good in my life because you can't stand seeing me happy." "That's not true. I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" "A successful man who loves me, who treats me better than any boyfriend I've ever had, who's talking about marriage and a future together." "He's talking about marriage already." "After 2 months, Amber, that's exactly his pattern." The slap came without warning, her open palm connecting with my cheek with enough force to turn heads throughout the restaurant. "Stay away from me. Stay away from Ryan. If you contact me again with these lies, I'll get a restraining order." She stormed out, leaving me with a stinging face and a sickening realization Ryan had already progressed further with Amber than I'd feared. That evening, my parents called. Not to check on me, but to inform me I was no longer welcome at family gatherings until this obsession ends. Your behavior is destructive and frankly disturbing, my father said. We've tolerated your jealousy of Amber for years, but this crosses a line. We're concerned about your mental health, sweetheart, my mother added in her deceptively gentle voice. Perhaps a break from family stress would be good for you. Effectively exiled from my family, I nearly gave up. What was the point of fighting so hard for people who didn't want to be saved? That night, I called Nathan to thank him for his help and terminate our arrangement. Before you decide, he said, there's something you should know. I found connections between Williams and a group under investigation for organized financial crime. This goes beyond romance scams, Miss Reed. Your sister could be in real danger, and not just financial. The exhaustion and despair that had been weighing me down lifted slightly. This wasn't just about vindication anymore. My sister's life could be at risk. What do we do now? I asked. Now, Nathan replied, we get serious. Strategic revenge requires patience. While my instinct was to rush in with all the evidence I'd gathered, Nathan counseled a different approach. Williams is sophisticated, he explained. If he senses you're closing in, he'll either disappear with whatever he's already taken from your family, or worse, accelerate his timeline. Instead, we developed a methodical plan. The first phase: infiltration. Through careful research, I identified Megan Porter, Ryan's assistant at the law firm. Single mother struggling financially despite her professional job, likely underpaid by design to ensure dependence. She was both Ryan's potential vulnerability, and I suspected another of his victims in a different way. I accidentally encountered Megan at the coffee shop near their office, strategically spilling my latte on my blouse to create a memorable interaction. She offered tissues and sympathy. I offered lunch as thanks. A friendship was born. Over several weeks, I cultivated this relationship carefully, never mentioning Ryan or my connection to Amber. Instead, I presented myself as Sophia Taylor, using my middle name as a pseudo-surname, a marketing consultant looking to expand her network. As Megan's trust grew, so did her revelations about her difficult boss, his controlling behavior, his mysterious meetings, his insistence that she handle personal matters beyond professional boundaries. Sometimes I feel more like his personal assistant than a legal one, she confided over our third lunch. Last week, he had me research his girlfriend's family business financials. Said it was for a potential client referral, but it felt off. My heart rate quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. That does seem unusual. Does he often have you look into personal connections? More and more lately. Always with some plausible explanation, but… She shrugged. The money's too good to question it. By our fifth meeting, Megan trusted me enough to vent about covering for Ryan's unexplained absences and managing his complex calendar with blocked periods she wasn't allowed to inquire about. When I suggested a girls' night to help her relax, she eagerly accepted. 3 cocktails into the evening while Megan was in the bathroom, I quickly installed tracking software on her work phone, a morally questionable act that I justified as necessary protection. The program would forward all of Ryan's communications through her phone to a secure server Nathan had established. Access to the building came next. Claiming interest in leasing office space in the same building as Ryan's firm, I obtained a temporary access card. During a deliberately timed visit when both Ryan and Megan were in court, I slipped into his office under the guise of having been directed there by confused security. The 2 minutes alone were enough to place a nearly undetectable listening device Nathan had procured through channels he refused to specify. Some questions are better unasked, he'd said when I'd pressed for details. Within days, the evidence began accumulating. Ryan's conversations revealed his true nature, cold, calculating, and explicitly targeting the Reed family assets. "The old man is practically begging me to marry into the family," he told someone on a phone call. "2 more months of playing the perfect gentleman, then we execute the prenup strategy. The daughter's so desperate for approval, she'll sign anything." Most damning was a recorded conversation with someone named Marcus about offshore account structures. "The Reed portfolio is worth 8 figures minimum. I'll need the Cayman framework expanded before the engagement." Engagement. The word hit like a physical blow. Things were moving faster than I'd anticipated. Confirmation came 2 days later via an exuberant text from my mother. "The first communication since my exile. Amber and Ryan are engaged. Wedding in 3 months. Please respect their happiness and keep your distance." 3 months. The timeline suddenly compressed dramatically. I shifted focus to financial investigation. Through Megan's access, I documented Ryan's elaborate network of shell companies and fraudulent accounts. His pattern became clear: marry into wealth, gradually gain financial control, then execute a complex series of transfers that made the money impossible to recover. The most horrifying discovery came while monitoring his legal work computer. Ryan had drafted documents for my father to sign that would make him a special advisor to the family company, granting him signing authority on major accounts in case of emergency. The documents were crafted to appear routine, but contained buried clauses that would essentially give him control over millions. When I brought this evidence to our family lawyer, Michael Brennan, his normally unflappable demeanor cracked. "This is sophisticated fraud," he said, reviewing the documents. "James hasn't signed these yet, has he?" "I don't know. We're not speaking currently." Michael's expression turned grim. "Sophia, if your father signs these, your family business could be gutted within days. Can't you warn him? He trusts you." Attorney-client privilege works both ways. Unless he asks me directly to review these specific documents, I can't interfere based on information obtained. Questionably. He gave me a pointed look. "So I'm on my own." I didn't say that. Michael carefully wrote something on a notepad, tore off the sheet, and handed it to me. "This is a purely hypothetical scenario that might interest a person in your position. I've never had this conversation." The note outlined a strategy to protect the Reed assets without directly confronting Ryan, creating a trust structure that would make his planned maneuvers impossible. "Thank you," I said, memorizing the information before destroying the note. For what Michael replied, with deliberate blandness, "We haven't spoken in months." As I left his office, my phone chimed with another text from my mother. "Dress, fitting for bridesmaids next Tuesday. Amber has graciously agreed you can participate if you've returned to your senses. Please confirm." I stared at the message, a plan crystallizing. Perhaps exile was exactly what I needed to be invited back into the fold, appearing, defeated, and accepting while working behind the scenes. I typed my response with calculated humility. "I'm so sorry for my behavior. Of course I'll be there. Thank you for the second chance." The board was set. The pieces were in motion. And Ryan Williams had no idea he wasn't the only one playing a long game. The bridesmaid dress was hideous, a sickly peach color that clashed with my complexion, and a cut seemingly designed to emphasize every insecurity I had about my body. Standing on the pedestal at the bridal boutique, surrounded by mirrors that offered no escape from my reflection, I suspected Amber had chosen it deliberately. "It's perfect," my sister declared, her eyes meeting mine in the mirror with unmistakable malice disguised as sisterly affection. "You look so comfortable." My mother nodded in agreement. "The color is very forgiving." I forced a smile, swallowing my pride. "It's your day, Amber. Whatever makes you happy." My apparent surrender had precisely the effect I'd hoped. Over the next 2 weeks, I was cautiously readmitted to the family circle, invited to dinners and wedding planning sessions. I played my role perfectly, subdued, apologetic, and visibly intimidated by Ryan's presence. For his part, Ryan maintained the charming facade, but occasionally let slip small cruelties when my parents weren't looking, a condescending smirk, a deliberately spilled drink on my dress, a whispered "still pathetic" when passing me in the hallway. I documented everything while appearing to accept the treatment. The facade was exhausting but necessary. The breakthrough came unexpectedly through my cousin Grace. Never particularly close to either me or Amber, Grace had always operated on the periphery of family dynamics. At the engagement party, I found her alone on the patio, nursing a glass of wine and observing the festivities through the window. Not feeling celebratory, I asked, joining her. "Just enjoying the show," she replied cryptically. After a moment of silence, she added, "You know she's in on it, right?" I nearly dropped my champagne flute. "What?" Grace's gaze remained on the party inside. "Amber. She knows exactly what he is, what they're doing." "How do you?" "I overheard them arguing at the lake house last month. About timing, about how much to take." She turned to me, her expression unreadable. "She's not a victim, Sophia. She's a participant." The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, yet it felt like a physical blow. I'd been operating under the assumption that my sister was being manipulated, that beneath the hostility was the Amber I grew up with, worthy of salvation. "Why are you telling me this?" I finally asked. "Because while you and Amber were competing for attention, I was watching. I've seen how they've treated you all these years." She shrugged. "And because Ryan hit on me last Christmas before he and Amber were official, when I turned him down, he implied I should keep quiet unless I wanted the family to learn about my problem." "What problem?" "Exactly." Grace's smile was bitter. "He researches everyone for leverage. Creates problems where none exist. Classic abuser tactic." An unexpected ally emerged in my cousin who had access and insights I lacked. Through Grace, I discovered Amber had already begun transferring family heirlooms to private storage, irreplaceable jewelry from our grandmother, art pieces from my father's collection, items whose disappearance hadn't yet been noticed. "They have a virtual catalog," Grace reported, after accessing Amber's laptop during a bridal luncheon. "Everything valued and prioritized for liquidation." This changed everything. My sister wasn't being controlled. She was a willing architect of our family's destruction. Confirmation came during a rare moment alone with Amber at the family home. My parents had stepped out, leaving us to finalize seating arrangements. The moment the door closed, Amber's pleasant demeanor vanished. "I know what you're doing," she said without preamble. I kept my expression neutral. "Helping with your wedding." "Don't play dumb." The questions, the sudden interest in the family business cozying up to Grace. "You're still investigating Ryan." "I'm trying to support your happiness," I said carefully. Amber laughed, the sound nothing like her practiced social tinkle. "God, you really are pathetic. Still thinking you're the hero of this story." She leaned closer. "Did it ever occur to you that maybe I know exactly who Ryan is? That maybe that's exactly why I chose him?" The confirmation struck harder than I'd anticipated, despite Grace's warning. "Why I managed." "Why would you do this to your own family?" "My family," Amber's expression hardened. "The same family that made it clear I was nothing but a decorative accessory, Dad's pretty showpiece to parade in front of clients' mom's dress-up doll to validate her social standing." She shook her head. "They never saw me, Sophia." "Not really. They saw what I could do for them." "So this is revenge. This is compensation. For 28 years of being valued only for how I make them look." Her smile turned cruel. "You were so busy feeling sorry for yourself, thinking I was the favorite, that you never noticed the cage they built around me." There are other ways to break free, Amber. Ways that don't involve destroying them. I'm not interested in breaking free, I'm interested in breaking even. She gathered her wedding folders. Stay out of my way, Sophia. Unlike our parents, Ryan and I actually respect your intelligence. That's why we've let you live in your delusion of investigation. But push further, and you'll discover exactly how thorough Ryan's research on you has been. The threat hung between us as she walked out, leaving me stunned not just by her admission, but by the realization that they'd been aware of my efforts all along. That night, my apartment was broken into. Nothing was taken, but my research materials were clearly disturbed. The message was obvious: escalation. Two could play that game. Through Nathan, I arranged a meeting with Ryan's business partner, Thomas Kelly. Initial contacts suggested he was unaware of Ryan's extracurricular activities and increasingly concerned about regulatory attention. Our meeting took place in a hotel bar 2 cities away. Thomas was nervous, constantly checking his surroundings. "I want to be clear," he began. "I'm here because things don't add up, not because I'm disloyal to my partner." "Of course," I assured him. "I'm only seeking clarity myself." Thomas provided access to financial records. I couldn't have obtained otherwise documentation of client funds, mysteriously rerouted of investments that existed only on paper, of regulatory inquiries buried through connections at oversight agencies. "I built this firm from nothing," Thomas said, his voice tight. "If these activities are connected to Ryan, I can't lose everything I've worked for. Help me stop him and you won't have to." As I left the meeting, my phone rang. My father. His voice sounded older, strained. "Your mother and I have been discussing the business succession," he said without preamble. "We've decided to accelerate our retirement planning. Amber and Ryan will take controlling interest after the wedding." My blood ran cold. "Dad, that's moving too fast. You always said transition would take years. Ryan has brought forward some compelling tax advantages to immediate transfer. He's very knowledgeable about these matters. Dad, please at least have Michael review everything before you sign. Michael is being difficult. Ryan has recommended someone more forward thinking." They were replacing the family lawyer. The last safeguard was being removed. "Dad, this is happening, Sophia. I'm informing you as courtesy. The papers will be signed at the rehearsal dinner." The timeline had collapsed entirely. I was out of time. That night, as I sat among my scattered research, nearly defeated, my phone lit up with an unknown number. Jessica, Ryan's ex-wife, her voice tense with fear. "Someone came looking for me," she said, without introduction. "Asked questions about you. I'm calling to warn you, and because I found something I was too afraid to bring forward before. Bank records, offshore accounts, communications with someone inside your family's company. It's all documented. I kept it as insurance. Insurance. In case he ever came back to finish what he started." Her voice hardened. "I'm done running, Sophia. Let's end this." The documents Jessica provided completed the puzzle in devastating detail. Combined with Thomas's financial records and Nathan's investigative findings, we had irrefutable evidence of Ryan's and now Amber's intentions. The scheme was more elaborate than I'd imagined. Shell companies established in the family name, ready to be filled with assets, falsified board resolutions, granting sweeping powers, even contingency plans if my parents resisted. Most disturbing was a document titled "Read Contingencies" that outlined management strategies for various family members, including a section labeled "Sophia Elimination," with detailed plans to have me declared mentally incompetent if necessary. Armed with this evidence, I arranged what I hoped would be a decisive family intervention. With Michael Brennan's help, I secured the private room at my parents' club, neutral territory with sufficient privacy. I arrived early, arranging the documentation in clear presentation folders. My father arrived first, his expression a mix of annoyance and concern. "This better be important, Sophia. Your mother and I have the florist appointment in 2 hours." "It's important, Dad. Please just wait until everyone arrives." My mother entered next, followed by Michael, whose presence clearly surprised my parents. "Why is our lawyer here?" my mother asked, suspicion immediately replacing her social smile. "Because what I'm about to show you has legal implications," I explained as calmly as possible. They sat reluctantly. I began methodically presenting the evidence, starting with Ryan's identity deception, then progressing through the financial fraud, the previous marriages, the documented plans for the Reed family assets. These offshore accounts, I explained, showing bank statements were created last month in shell companies bearing our family name but controlled exclusively by Ryan. And this, I slid forward, the prenuptial agreement draft Nathan had obtained contains hidden clauses that essentially sign over controlling interest in Reed Consulting, regardless of whether the marriage continues. My father's face had grown progressively paler. For the first time in my memory, he appeared genuinely shaken. "Is this verified?" he asked Michael directly. Our lawyer nodded gravely. "I've reviewed everything independently. The documentation is authentic." My mother's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. "I don't understand." "Ryan has been nothing but respectful, generous. That's his methodology," I explained gently. "He identifies targets, learns their vulnerabilities, and becomes exactly what they want him to be." I hesitated before adding, "And there's something else you need to know about Amber." The clubroom door swung open before I could continue. Amber stood in the doorway, her face a mask of concerned innocence. "Sorry, I'm late." The cake tasting ran over and she stopped taking in the scene. Her eyes narrowed slightly at the documents spread across the table. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice perfectly modulated to convey confusion. "Sit down, Amber," my father said, his businessman voice returning. "Sophia has made some very serious allegations about Ryan." "Oh, Dad, not this again." Amber's sigh was masterful, the perfect blend of exasperation and disappointment. She moved to his side, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I thought we'd moved past Sophia's issues." "These appear to be substantiated concerns," Michael interjected. Amber's expression flickered momentarily before settling into sympathy. "I know you're trying to help Mr. Brennan, but you don't understand the full context. Sophia has always had the difficulties with my relationships. Her therapist says it stems from abandonment anxiety after her fiancé left 3 years ago." I stared at her, genuinely speechless. "I've never been engaged." "What are you talking about?" Amber looked at me with practiced concern. This is exactly what Dr. Matthews was concerned about. The memory suppression. She turned to my parents. "Remember how she wouldn't acknowledge the breakup for months, kept planning the wedding like nothing had happened?" "That never happened," I protested, but doubt had already clouded my parents' expressions. Michael said firmly, "These documents stand on their own merits regardless of who presented them. I've verified the offshore accounts independently." My sister's expression hardened almost imperceptibly before she reached for her phone. "I think we need Ryan here for this conversation. He can explain the business arrangements properly." "No," I said quickly. "We need to discuss this as a family first." But it was too late. Amber had already sent the message, her fingers flying across the screen. What happened next unfolded with devastating efficiency. Within 15 minutes, Ryan arrived with another man, Howard Lentz, introduced as his firm's financial compliance officer. In reality, as Nathan later confirmed, Lentz was a paid crisis management specialist who worked exclusively with wealthy clients facing accusations. Ryan's performance was flawless, shocked concern giving way to patient explanation. Every document I'd presented was addressed with a plausible alternative interpretation. The name change protection from an unstable stalker after winning a high-profile case. Previous marriages, regrettable youthful mistakes he'd planned to disclose before the wedding. Offshore accounts, standard tax planning structures for high net worth individuals. I understand how these might seem suspicious when presented without context, Ryan said, his voice resonating with sincerity. I should have been more transparent about my past. That's on me. But I love Amber and would never do anything to harm the Reed family. Lentz then produced counter-documentation certification of the account's legitimate business purpose background check results. Ryan had supposedly run on himself to ensure transparency character references from judges, community leaders. All fabricated, I knew instinctively but professionally executed. Throughout this dismantling of my case, Amber maintained physical contact with our parents, a hand on my mother's arm, a supportive presence beside my father, subtly reinforcing the family unit from which I was increasingly excluded. The final blow came from my father himself. Sophia, he said, his voice heavy with disappointment, this vendetta has gone too far. You've involved our family lawyer in baseless accusations, created division at what should be a joyful time, and demonstrated a troubling inability to accept your sister's happiness. Dad, please. No. His expression hardened into something I'd never seen directed at me before, not disappointment or anger, but something worse, disgust. I've made allowances for your difficulties, supported you through job losses and personal struggles. But this, he gestured at the documents now being neatly collected by Ryan. This calculated attack on your sister's future crosses a line I cannot ignore. James, my mother, interjected softly. Perhaps we should consider what Michael said about the accounts. The accounts have been explained, my father snapped. By a qualified financial professional, not our emotionally disturbed daughter. The words hit like a physical blow. Until you get professional help, Sophia, he continued, I cannot, in good conscience, maintain our relationship. You are no longer welcome in our home or at family functions, including Amber's wedding. Dad. The word emerged as little more than a whisper. We're done here. He stood buttoning his jacket with the finality of a judge gaveling a case closed. Michael, I'll be reviewing our legal representation needs going forward. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes as they left. Ryan's sympathetic expression couldn't quite mask the triumph in his gaze. Amber lingered momentarily. I warned you, she said softly, her voice carrying only to my ears. You've always been nothing. The drive home passed in a blur of shock and grief. I'd lost everything, my family, my credibility, even Michael as an ally, after my father's implied dismissal. The evidence I'd so carefully gathered had been neutralized in 30 devastating minutes. Arriving at my apartment building, I found Lear scratched deep into my car door, the vandalism fresh enough that paint chips still clung to the concrete below. Inside my apartment, the subtle signs of another intrusion awaited drawers, slightly misaligned books on shelves rearranged. Nothing taken, but the message clear nowhere was safe. The next morning, an envelope had been slipped under my door containing photographs of me entering Nathan's office meeting, Jessica even sitting in the club waiting for my family, all with timestamps. Attached was a note in unfamiliar handwriting, obsessive behavior documented. Consider professional help. The harassment escalated rapidly. Threatening notes appeared daily. My email was hacked, my professional contacts receiving bizarre messages under my name. A break-in left my research materials destroyed, but valuable electronics untouched. Another message. When I confronted Amber at her workplace, security was waiting, apparently pre-warned about my unstable behavior. The altercation that followed was brief but public, ending with me physically restrained in front of her colleagues. Video of the incident, carefully edited to show only my reactions, circulated among family acquaintances. The final blow came when my last remaining job prospect evaporated after the hiring manager received an anonymous documentation of my concerning behavior, complete with statements from medical professionals I'd never met diagnosing conditions I didn't have. That night, sitting on my apartment floor, surrounded by the wreckage of my life, I allowed myself to consider defeat. Perhaps leaving starting fresh somewhere beyond Ryan's reach was the only option left. I had some savings, enough for a security deposit in a new city. No job, no references, but perhaps distance would provide safety, if not justice. As I began half-heartedly sorting items for packing, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Found something. Everything changes. Meet tomorrow. Nathan. Nathan's office was closed when I arrived, a handwritten sign indicating emergency client meeting, directing visitors to call for rescheduling. Instead of calling, I tried the door and found it unlocked. Inside, Nathan wasn't alone. A stern-faced woman in a tailored suit stood examining documents spread across his desk. She turned as I entered, assessing me with clinical precision. "Miss Reed," she said, extending her hand. "Special Agent Daniels, Financial Crimes Division, FBI. Your investigator has shared some interesting information with us." My gaze shifted to Nathan, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Ryan Williams has been on our radar for approximately 14 months, Agent Daniels continued. We've been building a case against a sophisticated network of financial fraudsters operating primarily through marriage-based schemes. Mr. Williams, or whatever name he's using this week, is a significant player but always manages to stay one step ahead of prosecution." How, I asked, still processing this development. "Witness intimidation. Evidence disappearing. Victims suddenly recanting statements." Her expression hardened. "Until now, we've never had someone willing to wear a wire." The implication hung in the air. "You want me to be an informant." "We want to offer you the opportunity to help stop him," she corrected carefully. "The decision is entirely yours. I won't minimize the risks." "What would it involve?" "Recording devices, guided conversations to elicit specific statements about financial activities, potentially accessing and copying documents." She paused. "I must emphasize that this would be dangerous. These individuals have demonstrated a willingness to use intimidation tactics." "They're already using them," I replied, thinking of the escalating harassment. "At least this way, it serves a purpose." For the next 3 weeks, I lived a double life. Outwardly, I appeared to have accepted defeat, subdued, withdrawn, focusing on job hunting and avoiding family contact. Privately, I worked with the FBI, meticulously documenting every interaction with Ryan and his associates. The engagement party provided the first major opportunity. With Agent Daniels' team monitoring from a surveillance van, I attended wearing recording equipment disguised as jewelry. My parents' cold greeting and Amber's triumphant introduction of me as her troubled sister to curious guests stung no less, despite being expected. Ryan, confident in his victory, made the critical mistake of overconfidence. In a moment of apparent sympathy, he pulled me aside to a quiet corner of the garden. "I understand your concern for your family," he began, his voice modulated to convey sincerity, while his eyes remained calculating. "Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. Perhaps I agreed playing along. Your business insights could actually be valuable to Reed Consulting's future. I've been reviewing the company structure, and there might be a role for you after all." The conversation that followed was a masterclass in subtle criminality. Without ever explicitly admitting wrongdoing, Ryan outlined his plans for restructuring the family business, describing mechanisms that Agent Daniels later confirmed were textbook fraud techniques. Most significantly, he mentioned the Cayman framework and referenced Marcus by name, connecting directly to conversations captured in earlier surveillance. Financial privacy is crucial in today's regulatory environment, he explained smoothly. The structures I've established for your family's assets will ensure flexibility. The recording was damning, but insufficient for immediate action. The FBI needed documentation of the actual fraudulent structures and ideally evidence of criminal intent. Working with Michael, who had been quietly gathering his own evidence, despite my father's dismissal threat, I arranged for financial documents to be anonymously delivered to my parents' attorney. Not enough to trigger immediate legal action, but sufficient to plant seeds of doubt. Simultaneously, Nathan set up surveillance at my family's lake house, where Ryan frequently conducted business meetings away from his official office. The resulting footage captured Ryan explicitly discussing illegal fund transfers with the mysterious Marcus, who turned out to be a disbarred attorney specializing in creating fraudulent corporate structures. Most damning was Ryan's casual reference to the timing. Once the wedding's done and the old man signs the transfer papers, we execute immediately, 48 hours maximum before the funds are untraceable. The noose tightened further when I leveraged my rekindled friendship with Megan to access additional documentation. Her growing suspicions about her boss made her a willing, if unwitting, accomplice. He's been having me shred unusual amounts of paperwork, she confided during a lunch I'd arranged specifically to gather information. And the calendar entries are becoming increasingly cryptic. The final phase involved creating division among Ryan's criminal associates. Using information provided by Agent Daniels I, orchestrated anonymous tips to several of Ryan's business partners, suggesting he was cooperating with authorities against them. The resulting paranoia created fissures in his network, with several associates suddenly becoming unreachable. Ryan's growing agitation manifested in increasingly erratic behavior. During a dinner at my parents' home where I had been reluctantly included at Amber's insistence, presumably to flaunt her victory, I noticed tension between the couple for the first time. "Where were you this afternoon?" Amber asked Ryan, during a momentary lull in conversation. "I stopped by your office, but Megan said you'd canceled all appointments." "Client emergency," Ryan replied smoothly. "Confidential matter." "That's the third emergency this week." Amber observed her smile tight. The cracks were spreading exactly as planned. Meanwhile, the family business began suffering from the association with Ryan as whispers circulated through professional networks. Several major clients placed projects on hold, citing reorganization concerns. My father, always attuned to financial implications, finally called me one evening. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "About Ryan." "I thought that subject was closed," I replied carefully. "Things have come to my attention. Information I can't ignore." His voice carried something I'd rarely heard from him: uncertainty. "I'm not saying you were right, but I need to understand what you found." It was the opening I'd been waiting for. The trap was set for the rehearsal dinner, an elaborate event at the city's most exclusive hotel with family wedding party and key business associates in attendance. Ryan had specifically insisted on signing the business transfer documents that evening, creating a perfect stage for the final act. I arrived early, coordinating with Agent Daniels' team, who had positioned agents throughout the venue. Thomas, Ryan's increasingly disillusioned partner, had agreed to wear additional recording equipment to capture conversations I couldn't access. As guests arrived and champagne flowed, I maintained my subdued role, watching Ryan work the room with practiced charm. Amber, resplendent in designer couture, played the ecstatic bride while occasionally shooting triumphant glances my way. My father had arranged a private room for the document signing, a brief business formality before the celebration continued. As the designated time approached, Ryan grew visibly anticipatory, checking his watch and exchanging meaningful glances with individuals I now knew were part of his network. The moment arrived. My father stood signaling for Ryan Amber and key family members to join him in the private room. I wasn't included in the invitation, but positioned myself near the entrance waiting. The doors opened 20 minutes later. Not with the expected emergence of the signing party, but with the unmistakable presence of FBI agents. Agent Daniels nodded almost imperceptibly as she passed, leading a visibly shocked Ryan in handcuffs. Behind them came my sister, her face contorted with rage and panic, and my parents, their expressions unreadable. The room fell silent as guests processed the unfolding scene. "What's happening?" someone finally asked. Agent Daniels responded with professional detachment. "Mr. Williams is being taken into custody on multiple federal charges, including wire, fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy." Ryan's eyes found mine across the room. The hatred in his gaze would have terrified me weeks earlier, but now I met it steadily, feeling nothing but a calm certainty that justice was finally being served. The aftermath unfolded rapidly. Ryan's associates scattered, some immediately contacting their attorneys, others simply disappearing. Amber alternated between publicly defending Ryan and privately distancing herself depending on her audience. The press coverage was extensive and devastating to the family reputation. "Wedding planner or master criminal," screamed one headline. "Bride's sister exposes groom's double life," declared another. My father suffered a minor heart attack from the stress, not serious but sufficient to focus priorities. As he recovered in the hospital, the family business implications became increasingly clear. Associations with Ryan had tainted major contracts, and the recovery would be lengthy and difficult. The most surprising turn came when Ryan, facing overwhelming evidence, offered to testify against accomplices, including Amber, in exchange for sentencing considerations. The betrayal completed the destruction of his carefully constructed facade. My sister's frantic call came at 3 in the morning, her voice barely recognizable through tears. "He's saying I knew everything," she sobbed. "That I was part of it from the beginning. You have to help me, Sophia. They're talking about criminal charges." The tables had turned completely, but the victory felt hollow as I contemplated the wreckage of my family. The rehearsal dinner debacle made national news. Cell phone videos of Ryan's arrest circulated online, turning our private family trauma into public entertainment. Speculation ran rampant about my role in the investigation, with narratives ranging from heroic whistleblower to jealous sister seeking revenge. The reality was far more complicated. In the immediate aftermath, I focused on supporting my father's recovery. Despite everything, he was still my dad, flawed, sometimes cruel, but now vulnerable in ways I'd never seen before. Sitting beside his hospital bed, watching his chest rise and fall as machines monitored his weakened heart, I found myself reflecting on the true cost of victory. "You were right," he said on the third day, his voice hoarse. "About everything." The admission long sought, but now bittersweet, hung between us. "I wish I hadn't been," I replied honestly. My mother, meanwhile, threw herself into damage control with the same perfectionist energy she'd once devoted to maintaining appearances. Her social connections proved surprisingly resilient, the sympathetic narrative of a family victimized by a conman more palatable than acknowledging Amber's complicity. "The important thing now is presenting a united front," she insisted, during a hushed conversation in the hospital corridor. "The Reed family stands together through adversity." The irony wasn't lost on me. Amber's situation deteriorated rapidly. Ryan's cooperation with authorities included detailed accounts of her knowing participation, backed by text messages, recorded conversations, and financial transactions she couldn't plausibly deny. While he faced serious federal charges, his testimony against others, including his own network of associates, offered him potential leniency. My sister had no such bargaining power. With Ryan's evidence against her, the prosecutor's initial offer included jail time, not the lengthy sentence he faced, but real incarceration nonetheless. When I visited her at the attorney's office where she was preparing for preliminary hearings, I barely recognized the polished, confident woman who had tormented me for months. In her place sat a hollow-eyed stranger, designer clothes, exchanged for simple business attire, chosen specifically to appear humble before potential jurors. "Why are you here?" she asked flatly when I entered the conference room. "Come to gloat." "No," I said, taking the seat across from her. "I came to understand." Understand what, how my life is ruined, how everyone's abandoned me. Her bitter laugh held no humor. Even our parents can barely look at me now. I want to understand why Amber. Not just Ryan, that part makes sense. But why turn against your own family? For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then something crumbled in her expression. "You really don't get it, do you? You were Dad's real daughter, the one he challenged, pushed expected things from. I was just decorative. The pretty one they trotted out at functions whose only value was in who I might eventually marry." Her eyes met mine, years of resentment evident. "Do you know what Dad said when I graduated college? Not congratulations or I'm proud of you. He said, now you can focus on finding the right husband. Like that was my only purpose." The revelation shifted something in my understanding of our shared history. Where I had seen favoritism, she had experienced objectification. Where I had envied her apparent freedom from expectations, she had felt fundamentally undervalued. "That doesn't justify what you did," I said finally. "No," she agreed, surprising me. "But it explains why it was so easy for Ryan to convince me I deserved more, that taking what should have been freely given wasn't really wrong." Our conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, unraveling decades of misunderstanding and mutual resentment. By its end, I understood my sister better than I ever had. Not enough to forgive, not yet, but enough to recognize the complex humanity beneath her actions. The legal proceedings moved with bureaucratic deliberation. Ryan, denied bail due to flight risk, remained in federal custody while his case progressed. His once immaculate appearance deteriorated with each court appearance. Designer suits, replaced by prison-issued clothing, his confidence giving way to calculating desperation. The investigation expanded beyond our family, uncovering previous victims across multiple states. Jessica's testimony proved crucial, her detailed records providing a pattern of behavior that strengthened the prosecution's case. Other women came forward with similar stories, creating a damning portrait of a serial predator. Reed Consulting suffered significant reputational damage. Several major clients suspended contracts pending resolution of the legal issues, particularly after learning how close the company had come to being compromised. My father, still recovering, physically faced the prospect of rebuilding from a significantly weakened position. "I need your help," he admitted, during a family meeting at the hospital. "Both of you," he added, including my mother. "I've made serious mistakes in judgment about Ryan, about the business, about our family. I need to make things right, but I can't do it alone." It was perhaps the most vulnerable I'd ever seen him. The business titan I'd grown up both fearing and admiring now looked older, smaller, genuinely humbled by circumstances beyond his control. News coverage continued relentlessly, each development generating fresh headlines. "Wedding fraudsters' victims speak out," blared one tabloid featuring interviews with Ryan's previous targets. "Family business empire teeters as fraud sheen exposed," declared another alongside unflattering photographs of my parents leaving court after providing witness statements. The narrative surrounding my role evolved as more details emerged. Initial skepticism about my motivations gave way to recognition of the methodical investigation I'd conducted. Several news outlets requested interviews, which I declined, preferring to focus on family recovery rather than public vindication. Social media proved less kind to Amber. Comment sections filled with vitriolic judgments based on partial information, the nuanced reality of her manipulation by Ryan lost in the public's appetite for villains and victims. The complexity of her complicity, both perpetrator and victim in different measures, couldn't be captured in headlines or tweets. The most difficult moment came during Ryan's bail hearing, where he made his offer to testify against Amber explicit and public. His attorney presented him as a man who had lost his way but now seeks redemption through cooperation, while portraying my sister as the true mastermind who had exploited family connections and trust. Watching her face as she absorbed this final betrayal, the man she had trusted enough to join in his schemes, now sacrificing her for his own benefit, I felt an unexpected pang of empathy beneath my lingering anger. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by reporters, shouting questions, our family finally presented the united front my mother had insisted upon, not the polished, perfect image she'd once cultivated, but something more authentic, a family damaged, humbled, but standing together despite everything. That evening, as we gathered in my father's hospital room, the first time we'd been together without lawyers or reporters in months, he reached for my hand. "I failed you, Sophia," he said, his voice steady, despite his weakness. "Not just with Ryan, but for years before that. I didn't see you clearly. I didn't value what you brought to this family." The acknowledgement, so long sought, brought unexpected tears. "We all failed each other," my mother added, surprising me further. "We created the perfect environment for someone like Ryan to exploit." As night fell over the city, visible through the hospital window, we began the painful process of honest conversation about the past, about our family dynamics, about the path forward. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps its prerequisite understanding. Outside headlines continued to dissect our family's trauma for public consumption. Inside that quiet room, something broken began the slow process of healing. 6 months passed like a slow exhale after years of held breath. Seasons changed, leaves fell, snow dusted the city and melted away again, all while our family's narrative evolved from breaking news to occasional updates. Ryan accepted a plea deal that included 15 years in federal prison with eligibility for parole after 10. In exchange, his testimony secured convictions against several members of his financial fraud network, including the elusive Marcus, who turned out to be a former securities trader with connections to organized crime. Amber's legal situation resolved with relative leniency, 3 years probation, significant community service, and restitution payments. Her cooperation and status as a partially manipulated participant rather than an originator of the scheme worked in her favor, though the psychological sentence proved far harsher than the legal one. Her reputation destroyed her relationship with our parents. Fundamentally altered, she moved into a modest apartment across town and began therapy. Reed Consulting survived, though diminished. My father, recovering steadily but permanently changed by his health scare, restructured the company with a focus on transparency and ethical practices. Most surprisingly, he asked for my input during the rebuilding process, valuing my marketing expertise and analytical abilities in ways he never had before. "You see things differently," he admitted during a strategy session. "That's not a weakness, it's exactly what we need right now." My mother's transformation proved equally remarkable. The perfectionist facade cracked permanently, revealing a woman more complex than I'd previously recognized. Her social circle contracted to those who stood by the family during the scandal, but those relationships deepened beyond superficial connections. "I spent decades worrying what people thought of us," she confessed during one of our newly established weekly lunches. "Now I know exactly who my real friends are, and I'm finding I prefer authenticity to admiration." Working with Michael Brennan, we established new safeguards for the family business trust structures that protected assets from future manipulation and governance protocols, requiring multiple approvals for significant decisions. You've essentially built an immunity system against predators like Williams, Michael observed, as we finalized the documents. This family won't be vulnerable to that type of attack again. The documents represented more than legal protection. They symbolized a fundamental shift in family dynamics. No single individual, not even my father, could make unilateral decisions affecting everyone's futures. We had become by necessity and design a collaborative unit. My own life transformed perhaps most dramatically. The investigative skills I'd developed tracking Ryan caught the attention of a corporate security firm specializing in fraud prevention. What began as consulting evolved into a full leadership position, Director of Vulnerability Assessment, helping companies identify and address potential exploitation points in their organizational and financial structures. "You have a unique perspective," my new employer explained during the job offer. "You understand both the technical aspects of fraud and the human elements that facilitate it. That combination is remarkably rare." The position provided not just financial stability, but a sense of purpose, transforming my personal trauma into expertise that protected others from similar experiences. Nathan Cooper and I maintained contact, our professional relationship evolving into friendship and eventually something more. His grounded perspective and ethical boundaries provided a counterbalance to my sometimes obsessive tendencies, while my persistence complemented his methodical approach. "We make a good team," he observed, 6 months into our relationship. Professionally and personally, the most complicated healing process involved Amber. Our relationship, damaged by decades of competition and months of active betrayal, couldn't be repaired through simple forgiveness or apology. Instead, we began with small steps, occasional coffee meetings, carefully neutral conversations, gradual exploration of the misunderstandings that had shaped our interactions. "I always thought you had everything," she admitted during one such meeting. "Dad's respect, Mom's pride, your own path. I never saw how they undermined you." "And I thought you were the golden child," I replied. "Protected from expectations, free to just be admired." I never understood how confining that pedestal was. These conversations, painful but necessary, gradually built something new between us. Not the closeness of conventional sisters, perhaps, but a relationship based on mutual understanding rather than competition and resentment. Thanksgiving arrived, the first major holiday since the scandal. My mother, abandoning her tradition of elaborate formal dinners, suggested a potluck at my father's lake house, casual, imperfect, focused on connection rather than impression. Seated around that table, my parents Amber, Michael, and his wife, Nathan, and me, I found myself reflecting on the stark contrast with the dinner where this story began. The same people occupied fundamentally different positions in relation to each other, transformed by crisis into more authentic versions of themselves. Jessica joined us for dessert, her presence symbolizing the closing of a circle. She and Amber shared a brief, intense conversation on the deck, two women connected by the same manipulator, finding common ground in their recovery journeys. "There's something powerful about survivors connecting," Jessica told me later. "It helps transform the narrative from victimhood to resilience." As evening approached and guests began departing, my father asked me to stay behind. We walked along the lakeshore, the November air crisp against our faces. "I've been thinking about legacy," he said after a comfortable silence. "Not just the business, but what we leave behind in relationships, in impact on others." "That sounds suspiciously like personal growth, Dad," I teased gently. He laughed, a genuine sound I'd heard more in recent months than in years prior. "Apparently, near-death experiences and public humiliation are effective teachers." His expression turned serious. "I'm proud of you, Sophia. Not just for exposing Ryan, but for who you are, your integrity, your persistence. I should have seen those qualities as strengths long ago. The words so long desired they'd almost lost, meaning now washed over me with unexpected impact. Not because I still desperately needed his approval, but because I recognized the genuine change behind them. Later that night, driving home with Nathan, I found myself contemplating the complex nature of revenge versus justice. What had begun as a desire to vindicate myself had evolved into protection of my family, even those who had hurt me. The satisfaction came not from seeing others suffer, but from truth finally acknowledged and authenticity embraced. "You're quiet," Nathan observed. "Just thinking about how differently this all could have ended," I replied. "If I'd given up if you hadn't, helped me if the FBI hadn't gotten involved." "But it didn't end that way," he reminded me. "Sometimes persistence pays off." Sometimes I agreed, watching the familiar streets pass by the same city, but viewed through entirely different eyes. The journey from that humiliating dinner to this moment of peace had cost tremendously, financially, emotionally, relationally. Yet the transformation, while painful, had created something more valuable than the superficial harmony. It replaced a family built on truth rather than appearance, on mutual respect, rather than power dynamics, on authentic connection rather than obligatory roles. The mocking laughter that once surrounded that dinner table had been replaced by something far more precious: honest conversation, genuine understanding, and the hard-earned wisdom that comes from surviving betrayal with your humanity intact. I wonder if you've ever experienced something similar in your own family. Have you witnessed how crisis can sometimes reveal truths that comfort conceals? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you connected with this story. Remember, sometimes the most painful chapters lead to the most meaningful transformations. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it brings some comfort if you're facing your own family struggles. Until next time,